Most people move through life believing influence is about charisma, kindness, or communication skills. They believe authority is something you earn by being good, by being visible, by being agreeable. This is the first illusion, and illusions are fatal. Machiavelli understood this when he wrote The Prince. The Prince is not a book about cruelty, it is a manual about reality. It strips morality from power and examines what actually moves human beings, not what they claim moves them, what truly does. Sun Tzu understood the same truth centuries earlier in The Art of War. The art of war is not about battlefields, it is about perception, timing, terrain, and psychological dominance. It is about defeating an opponent before he realizes he is in a contest. When you combine them, you do not get philosophy, you get a weapon. You live in a social battlefield. Offices, families, friendships, online platforms, hierarchies everywhere. You are either shaping perception or being shaped by it. There is no neutral ground. Your nervous system knows this. Long before language, before law, before civilization, there was dominance, there was hierarchy, there was predator and prey. Human beings evolved in tribes where status meant survival. High status meant protection, access, mating opportunity. Low status meant vulnerability, exclusion, death. This wiring never disappeared, it adapted. Today, when someone interrupts you and you say nothing, your body registers submission. When someone speaks slowly and holds silence without flinching, your body registers dominance. You may call it confidence, but your biology calls it hierarchy. Machiavelli teaches you to control the image. Sun Tzu teaches you to control the environment. Together, they teach you to control the mind of your opponent without ever touching him. You have been taught that authenticity is power, that transparency builds trust, that being liked is the goal. These are comforting lies told to keep you predictable. Machiavelli would tell you that it is safer to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. Why? Because love is conditional, it depends on emotion, and emotion fluctuates. Fear, however, is anchored in survival. It is stable, it is primal, it endures. Sun Tzu would refine this further. The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting, not by screaming, not by threatening, but by making resistance feel futile before it begins. This is influence at its highest level. Influence is not persuasion. Persuasion is surface level. Influence is altering the internal calculations of another human being. It is entering their mind and adjusting the weight of their fears, desires, and expectations without them realizing it. You do this by controlling three forces: perception, uncertainty, and consequence. Perception is the story others construct about you. You do not need to be powerful. You need to appear strategically unpredictable and capable of consequence. The human brain fills gaps with worst-case scenarios. If they are unsure of your limits, they assume strength. Uncertainty creates psychological tension. Sun Tzu advises to be formless, to appear weak when strong, and strong when weak. Why? Because certainty allows others to plan against you. Uncertainty paralyzes, it forces hesitation, and hesitation is submission. Consequence is the unspoken understanding that crossing you has a cost. Machiavelli was clear: mercy without control breeds contempt. If people learn there is no price for disrespect, they will test you repeatedly. Humans probe boundaries the way predators test fences. You have been testing fences your entire life. So has everyone around you. Here is the uncomfortable truth. Most of your personality is a collection of defensive adaptations designed to avoid social punishment. You laugh too quickly, you soften your tone, you explain yourself excessively. These are signals, and signals define rank.
The moment you understand this, you stop seeking approval and start engineering response. Power does not require volume, it requires control of variables. Imagine two individuals in a room. One speaks often, filling silence nervously. The other speaks rarely, but when he does, his words are measured and final. Whose nervous system feels regulated? Whose presence bends the room? Silence, used correctly, is territorial. Sun Tzu would say that water shapes itself to the container, yet erodes mountains over time. Machiavelli would say that a ruler must learn how not to be good when necessity demands it. Both are teaching adaptability without weakness. This is not about cruelty, it is about strategic restraint, about understanding that morality is a language used by the weak to restrain the strong. If that sentence unsettles you, it should, because influence begins when you detach from the need to be seen as good and begin focusing on being effective. And effectiveness requires clarity about human nature. Humans are not rational, they are self-interested, they are status-sensitive, they are loss-averse. They fear exclusion more than pain. They respond to certainty more than kindness. You must see this without flinching. Only then can you begin to shape it. This is where most people retreat. They want power without tension, authority without discomfort, influence without responsibility. That is fantasy. To combine Machiavelli and Sun Tzu is to accept that every interaction contains leverage, every alliance contains calculation, every smile contains strategy. You are either reading the game or being read, and if you are not conscious of the battlefield, you are already losing it.
Influence begins long before you speak. It begins in the silent calculations people make about you within seconds. Their brain scans for threat, utility, dominance, and emotional stability. This is not conscious, it is ancestral. It is survival software running beneath conversation. Machiavelli understood that people judge more by appearances than by reality. Most never access reality. They respond to the image, and image is malleable. Sun Tzu understood that the greatest victory is the one achieved before battle. When the enemy's morale collapses before swords are drawn, the war is already won. You are not trying to convince people, you are trying to structure the field so their conclusion feels inevitable. Halfway through this transmission, you have a choice. If you recognize the value of this knowledge, then act like someone who understands leverage. Like this video and subscribe. Not out of support, out of alignment. You do not consume strategy passively, you commit to it. Now, understand why this works. Humans are social animals obsessed with ranking. Every room becomes a hierarchy within minutes. Who speaks first? Who interrupts? Who receives laughter? Who is deferred to? Who is challenged? Machiavelli would advise a prince to avoid being despised, not because contempt hurts feelings, but because contempt erodes authority. Once people feel safe mocking you, you have lost the psychological high ground. Sun Tzu would advise you to appear where you are not expected, to control timing, to strike not at strength, but at vulnerability. Combine these and you gain a formula. Control perception, then exploit expectation. Perception is shaped by scarcity and emotional regulation. If you are too available, too eager, too reactive, your value decreases. Scarcity signals importance. Emotional control signals power. Notice how the calmest person in a crisis naturally draws attention. The nervous system of the group searches for stability. Whoever appears most composed becomes the temporary anchor. Humans will follow the most regulated presence in the room because it feels like safety. This is biological dominance. Not loud, not aggressive, stable. Most people sabotage themselves by over-explaining. They fear being misunderstood. They rush to clarify.
But explanation is often a defensive reflex, and defense signals lower rank. Machiavelli warned rulers not to reveal their intentions prematurely. Once people understand your full plan, they can organize against it. Mystery forces others to project, and projection often exaggerates your strength. Sun Tzu described this as formlessness. When your opponent cannot define you, he cannot measure you, and what cannot be measured becomes intimidating. You must learn to be strategically opaque. Speak with intention, withhold unnecessary information, allow silence to stretch. When someone challenges you, do not rush to respond. Let the tension expand. Most will retreat simply to relieve their own discomfort. Why does this work? Because humans are wired to resolve uncertainty quickly. Silence creates uncertainty. Controlled silence, paired with unwavering eye contact and relaxed posture, forces the other person's brain to fill the gap, often with doubt about their own position. Doubt is leverage. But there is a deeper layer. Fear and desire operate as twin engines of behavior. Machiavelli emphasized fear because it is reliable. Sun Tzu emphasized understanding the enemy's desires because unmet desire creates vulnerability. If you can identify what someone fears losing and what they crave gaining, you can guide their decisions without overt pressure. People do not move toward logic. They move away from pain and toward status. Status is the hidden currency of all interaction. When you praise someone publicly, you increase their status. When you correct someone publicly, you threaten it. When you ignore someone's attempt to provoke you, you deny them status. Control status, and you control behavior. This is why impulsive reactions are deadly. The moment you react emotionally, you signal that someone else can control your internal state. That is surrender. Sun Tzu would call this losing composure before the battle begins. Machiavelli would call it weakness that invites attack. You must become difficult to read and impossible to rattle. But be warned, coldness without calculation becomes isolation. Fear without measured fairness becomes rebellion. Machiavelli was clear. Cruelty must be used swiftly and sparingly. Overuse breeds hatred, and hatred unites enemies. Influence is not about constant pressure. It is about calibrated pressure. A predator does not chase every movement. It waits, it watches, it conserves energy. It strikes when escape routes are limited. You must learn patience. Patience creates advantage because most people are impulsive. They reveal their intentions too early. They attack prematurely. They talk too much when nervous. All you need to do is observe. Observance is power. The person who speaks less gathers more data. The person who listens strategically identifies insecurities. The person who asks pointed questions without revealing his own stance controls the direction of thought. You are not there to win arguments. You are there to shape conclusions. And shaping conclusions requires detachment. If you crave approval, you will hesitate. If you fear rejection, you will soften. If you need to be liked, you will compromise leverage. Machiavelli stripped away that illusion. Sun Tzu operationalized it. Influence belongs to those who can detach emotionally while remaining psychologically precise. Now we will dissect how to dismantle resistance without direct confrontation and how to turn opposition into obedience without force.
Before we go further, answer this honestly. Have you ever felt resistance from someone and tried to push harder only to watch them dig in deeper? Comment below. Now understand why that happened. Direct force triggers counterforce. This is not philosophy, it is physics, it is psychology, it is ego preservation. When someone feels cornered, their nervous system activates defense. Logic shuts down, identity takes over. They are no longer responding to your argument, they are protecting their status. Sun Tzu warned that when you surround an army completely, you leave them no option but to fight with desperation.
A desperate opponent is dangerous. Give them an exit. Give them a path that feels like choice. Machiavelli would agree. A ruler who humiliates opponents publicly creates martyrs, and martyrs inspire rebellion. If you want influence, you must dismantle resistance invisibly. The first principle is ego preservation. People will endure loss, they will endure inconvenience, but they will not willingly endure humiliation. Status threat is one of the most powerful psychological triggers. When someone senses that complying with you lowers their rank, they resist, even if compliance benefits them. So you invert the dynamic. You let them feel like the author of the decision. This is not manipulation in the theatrical sense. It is strategic architecture. You frame outcomes in a way that aligns with their self-image. If they see themselves as intelligent, present the idea as something they are uniquely perceptive enough to recognize. If they see themselves as dominant, present agreement as a calculated move that reinforces their control. Humans defend identity more fiercely than territory. Sun Tzu mastered this by attacking strategy, not soldiers. If you undermine the belief system guiding action, the action collapses naturally. Machiavelli mastered it by understanding appearances. A prince who appears generous can impose heavy burdens without revolt. Why? Because the story surrounding the act reframes its meaning. Control the story, control the response. Now we move into deeper territory. Most people think confrontation is about strength. It is not. It is about leverage. Strength without leverage is noise. Leverage without noise is dominance. Imagine someone challenges you publicly. They question your competence. They attempt to raise their status at your expense. The instinct of the untrained mind is immediate rebuttal, defense, justification. But defense concedes something subtle, that their judgment matters. Instead, you pause, you hold silence, you respond with measured curiosity rather than anger. Interesting perspective. This phrase does not validate, it does not attack, it destabilizes. It signals that their attempt to provoke you failed. It reframes the interaction from confrontation to observation. In that moment, the hierarchy resets. Why does this work? Because social power is heavily influenced by emotional control. The individual who regulates the emotional temperature of the exchange appears dominant. The one who reacts appears governed. Machiavelli warned that princes must avoid being seen as unstable. Instability invites plots. Sun Tzu warned that anger can be manipulated. If an opponent can provoke you, he can predict you. Predictability is weakness. You must become strategically unpredictable yet emotionally stable. This creates psychological asymmetry. Others cannot easily calculate your moves, but they sense internal control. That combination is intimidating. Now consider alliances. Both Machiavelli and Sun Tzu understood that power often flows through coalitions, but alliances are never permanent. They are intersections of interest. The moment interests diverge, loyalty dissolves. You must never mistake alignment for devotion. Influence requires constant assessment of incentives. What does this person gain by standing with you? What do they lose by opposing you? Increase the former, subtly emphasize the latter. Fear and reward must coexist. Too much fear creates secret enemies. Too much reward creates entitlement. The balance creates dependence. Dependence is the ultimate leverage. If others rely on you for clarity, access, opportunity, or protection, they defend your position instinctively, not because they love you, because losing you feels costly. This is why competence is non-negotiable. Strategic aura without capability collapses eventually. Machiavelli warned against mercenaries, borrowed strength that fails under pressure. Sun Tzu demanded preparation before conflict. Your influence must be backed by real skill. Otherwise, when tested, the illusion fractures. Now we approach something more uncomfortable. To influence effectively, you must be willing to let certain relationships dissolve. Weak alliances dilute authority. Constant appeasement erodes presence. Not everyone deserves proximity. Selective association elevates status. Scarcity increases perceived value. When access to you is not automatic, it becomes desirable. But do not confuse isolation with elevation. The lone wolf myth is seductive but flawed. Wolves hunt in packs for a reason. Power is networked. Your task is not to withdraw from the hierarchy, it is to sit higher within it, and that requires controlled detachment. Now we will explore how to reshape your identity so that influence radiates before you speak, how to engineer respect without demanding it, and how to convert silent presence into silent authority.
Influence reaches its highest form when it no longer feels like effort. When you enter a room and the atmosphere adjusts before you speak, you are no longer persuading, you are conditioning. Conditioning is the hidden layer beneath influence. It is repetition of signals until others internalize a stable expectation about you. And expectation governs behavior more powerfully than command. Machiavelli understood reputation as a fortress. A prince who is known for decisive retaliation rarely needs to retaliate often. The memory of consequence does the work for him. The prince teaches that cruelty, when necessary, must be delivered swiftly and conclusively, so its echo lingers longer than its application. Sun Tzu understood psychological positioning with equal precision. The art of war explains that momentum, what he calls shi, is built gradually, then released suddenly. The enemy feels overwhelmed not by a single action, but by accumulated pressure. You must apply this to identity. Most people present fragmented versions of themselves depending on the audience. Soft in one room, aggressive in another, inconsistent. Inconsistency destroys authority because it prevents prediction, and prediction, paradoxically, is necessary for trust. You must be strategically consistent, calm under pressure, measured in speech, selective in reaction, decisive in boundary enforcement. When these signals repeat, others adjust their internal calculations. They begin to treat you as stable terrain, and stable terrain becomes ground others stand on carefully. Respect is not demanded, it is induced. The key is controlled exposure to consequence. If someone crosses a line and nothing happens, your authority weakens. If someone crosses a line and you explode emotionally, your authority also weakens. The ideal response is proportional, controlled, and memorable. Not dramatic, not vindictive, final. Humans learn through reinforcement. Reward what aligns, correct what challenges, but always without visible agitation. Your emotional neutrality must remain intact. That neutrality suggests that enforcement is not personal, it is structural. Structural power is terrifying because it feels inevitable. Now we move deeper. There is a level beyond reaction, beyond reputation. It is identity engineering. Identity is the story you tell yourself about who you are. It is also the story others tell about you when you are absent. Influence solidifies when those two narratives align. If you see yourself as cautious but project boldness, microfractures appear. People sense incongruence. The subconscious mind detects tension between posture and pulse. You must resolve that fracture internally. Sun Tzu insisted that victory comes from knowing yourself and knowing the enemy. Most people attempt to read others while remaining blind to their own weaknesses. This creates exploitable blind spots. Where are you predictable? Where are you emotionally reactive? Where do you crave validation? These are entry points for manipulation. Eliminate them, not by suppression, but by awareness. When you observe your impulses without obeying them, you detach from their control. That detachment becomes composure.
Composure becomes power. Machiavelli did not advocate chaos. He advocated calculated flexibility. A ruler must know how to act against mercy, faith, humanity, and religion when survival requires it. This is not evil, it is strategic adaptation. But here is the warning. Power amplifies character. If your foundation is insecurity, influence becomes tyranny. If your foundation is clarity, influence becomes order. Many who learn these principles misuse them. They overplay fear. They weaponize silence excessively. They isolate themselves in cold detachment, and eventually they face unified opposition. Remember this: hatred unites enemies more effectively than ambition unites allies. You must maintain calibrated tension, not oppression. Now understand the inversion. When you master influence, you no longer chase recognition. Recognition chases you. You no longer argue to win. Others concede preemptively. You no longer explain boundaries. They are sensed. This is silent authority. It is not loud. It is not theatrical. It is unmistakable. And it places you in a rare category.
Now we assemble the full architecture. Machiavelli gives you the skeleton of power. Sun Tzu gives you its nervous system. When fused, they form a living doctrine of influence. Cold, adaptive, precise. You now understand perception is the gateway. Control how you are seen, and you control the starting point of every interaction. You understand uncertainty creates hesitation, and hesitation redistributes hierarchy. You understand consequence, delivered without emotion, imprints memory deeper than words ever could. But mastery is not in knowing these pieces separately. Mastery is integration. The ultimate level of influence is when your presence becomes predictive of outcome. When people think, if I cross this line, there will be cost. When they think, if I align with this person, there will be gain. When they think, if I oppose him, I may lose more than I win. Notice something. You never had to raise your voice. You never had to threaten. You never had to plead. The battlefield shifted because perception shifted. Sun Tzu wrote that every battle is won before it is fought, the art of war. He meant preparation, positioning, terrain. In social life, terrain is emotional climate. Positioning is reputation. Preparation is self-mastery. Machiavelli wrote that men judge more by the eye than by the hand, the prince. He meant that image outpaces reality in shaping obedience. Combine them and you arrive at this conclusion: influence is engineered inevitability. You create inevitability by aligning fear and desire in your favor. Fear of losing access to you, fear of facing your indifference, desire for your approval, desire for your alliance. Indifference, used correctly, is more powerful than aggression. Aggression invites resistance. Indifference destabilizes identity. When someone cannot provoke you, cannot elicit reaction, cannot move you emotionally, they begin to question their own position. Your stability becomes a mirror reflecting their instability. This is the predator's calm. But there is one final threshold. True dominance is internal before it is external. If you still need validation, you will leak it through micro-behaviors. If you still fear exclusion, you will overextend. If you still crave being understood, you will explain too much. You must outgrow these impulses. That does not mean you become cold. It means you become sovereign. Sovereignty is self-command. When you command yourself, you no longer beg for rank. You occupy it. And here is the inversion few understand. The higher you rise in influence, the less you speak about power. You demonstrate it quietly. You exercise it sparingly. You reveal it only when necessary. Because overt displays are for those trying to prove something. The disciplined strategist does not chase dominance. He assumes it and adjusts accordingly. At this level, you do not see people as enemies or allies in emotional terms. You see incentives, you see motivations, you see pressure points. Not to exploit recklessly, but to navigate intelligently. This is not cruelty, it is clarity. Clarity strips away illusion, the illusion that the world is fair, the illusion that intentions matter more than outcomes, the illusion that goodness guarantees security. Machiavelli shattered those illusions centuries ago. Sun Tzu operationalized their consequences even earlier. Now you hold both lenses. With them, you can read rooms faster, assess hierarchies accurately, neutralize opposition without spectacle, create loyalty without begging for it. But understand this, knowledge without discipline becomes arrogance, and arrogance blinds. You must remain observant, adaptive, self-aware. Power is not static, it is dynamic tension. Lose vigilance, and someone recalibrates the hierarchy without you noticing. This is why influence is not a tactic, it is an identity. An identity built on composure, on strategic silence, on calibrated consequence, on emotional invulnerability. Few are willing to cultivate this fully. Most prefer comfort over control. If you have followed this far, you are not most people. You stand at a threshold. Beyond it is a different way of moving through the world, less reactive, more deliberate, less emotional, more precise. You will notice shifts immediately. Conversations tilt, challenges soften, resistance decreases, not because the world changed, because you did. And here is the final decision. Those who merely consume ideas return to old habits tomorrow. Those who choose dominance integrate them permanently. If you are the latter, you already know what to do. Subscribe, not as a follower, as someone committed to mastering power with discipline and clarity. Only those who intend to operate above the noise remain.